Subject this morning, after death what? After death, unconsciousness and oblivion. Or on the other hand, the greatest thing you can have, oneness with the Master of the universe, with his peace and his power and his joy. Take your choice. It's up to you. What you want, you can have. Now, this subject after death, of course, always attracts people because those things which are not known entice us, and we search for those things which we do not have and wonder about them. But after death can be known about, so to speak, if you do a little work here while you are living. But if you leave it until you pass into the unknown, thinking, well, I'll find out then all about it, you won't find out a thing. All you'll find out is that there'll be a great struggle to get out of this body, and then you will forget and rest a little while, and then come again and go through it over and over and over. So let us, if we can, find out about this condition after death. After death what? It is up to us. We can know, because God has sent the channel of self-realization and the beloved Master for those who will follow, to know just that thing, what we are to be after death. What is the condition? What is the state of consciousness? If we know that now, it will be known to us. We will be familiar with it, and there'll be no mysticism about it, or mystical aspect about death. And the greatest of all, there'll be no fear and pain. And that's what we want to get rid of. I have one or two references about this I'd like to give you first. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 11th verse. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. He that overcometh what? Worldly consciousness, attachment to worldly things, attachment to this body. Once overcome that, then you'll know the consciousness, the eternal consciousness behind. How can there be a second death? So this is a wonderful scripture. Remember it. Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 11th verse. And then we have also Revelation, the 2nd chapter, the 10th verse. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. What is faithful unto death? What does that mean? It simply means to keep on overcoming this consciousness of delusion of outward things. Keep at it. Keep on overcoming until death comes. Then you will have life eternal. You will have what St. Paul said in Corinthians, behold, I die daily. He died how? He died to worldly consciousness. And what did he receive? I protest by the rejoicing that you have in Christ, I die daily. He had the Christ consciousness, the eternal consciousness. Why? Because he overcame. And he regularly overcame worldly consciousness that he might perceive and merge and be one with the great light of God, in which is his omniscience and love. Larry Marshall was another Christ. He did the same thing, a true Son of God. There people came from far and wide to see him without heartbeat, without breath, fully alive and awake in the eternal part of him. He wasn't dead. He was dead to worldly consciousness. He was fully alive in the great eternal consciousness of God within. If Jesus Christ can do it, St. Paul can do it, Larry Marshall can do it, and all Christs have done it, why cannot we? We are children of God made in his image. After death, what? Whatever we want. If we want oblivion and unconsciousness, you can have it. If you want true freedom of the soul, wherein you feel the limitations of earthly consciousness fall off, gravity, attachment, weight, and feel the true freedom of God, you can have it, because it is God who is in each and every one of us. He's covered up a little bit. We have to remove those coverings that we may feel and know his oneness in us. So, how to do this? It is as simple as this. He which means every one of us, he who makes the presence of God as cosmic energy or life force in the body, and his consciousness or his great love in the heart, he who makes that dynamic to his consciousness can know what will come after death. It's up to us. It's up to us. Remember, as I read in the Scripture, two immutable things God has given: the presence of himself as the cosmic energy and his consciousness in that energy, his great omniscience. He has given us, they are in us. Therefore, if we merge in that, make that our own, then we will have that when we pass beyond this change known as death. It is that great creative force of God, his great cosmic power, that has made all things. And it is his great love, his pull, love of attraction, his force of attraction which is pulling us back, which is his great love. Know those two things. Everything is made from that. Know that. Then when death comes, you will be conscious of that on the other side. That's all there is. But everything is in there, because God's omniscience and his fullness is in his cosmic energy plus his omniscience. That's what you will feel if you feel it now in this life. So, to know what is going to happen after death, we have to know the eternal part of us. We have to know the real part of us. We have to know the unchanging part of us. Why? Because that alone transcends death. Do you understand? This worldly consciousness, as I see you, you see me, seems so familiar, so real. But in sleep, where is it gone? Where is the title? Where is the name? Where is your position? Where is everything? It's gone. But still the reality in you is there, but you don't know it. We have to know that. Why? Because that alone transcends death. How can you know what is coming after death unless you know that? Not after death, but right now, while you are awake and conscious of your existence. We have to make it dynamic to our consciousness. And so, if we are conscious of that in this life, we will be conscious of it, aware of it, and awake in it after death. If not, you will not know much about after death. As the Master used to say, when one dies, as the great cosmic force, life force in the body goes up through the spine and out through the thousand-rayed lotus on the top of the head and out and merges in the great presence of God. When that happens, it enlivens all the little films in the subconscious mind, and your whole life is spread before you. And then, if you're conscious, have made that eternal light of God your own during this life, there'll be no break in continuity of consciousness. If you've lived an undesirable life, you'll have to see it all. But if you have made your consciousness dynamic to the eternal part of you, the light and presence of God, you will slip through that into the great light and that subconscious flare which happens at that time. That subconscious revelation of all you have done during this life cannot affect you, because you realize that it is a play, because you are one with the great light of God. So that's the whole thing in overcoming death, is to be familiar with that part of you, the eternal part of you, which always was and always will be, which never had a birth. It is this waking consciousness that has had the birth. It must therefore die. Who wants to be tied up with something that's going to pass away? It has its lures, attractions, material things are all right, but there comes a time when you realize in the end you have nothing. So if you want to have something after you're through with this play, know the eternal part of you that always was, always will be. Be one with God who resides right in you. Now going on just a little bit here. If we are to know about after death, We have to know about it while still here in this existence. That is the important thing. In other words, we have to be able to die consciously. That's all. That is to know that you are passing above this body into the reality which is within you. You have to learn to die consciously, that's all. Now in sleep, ordinarily we sleep unconsciously. There is quite some relaxation in sleep, but it's in an unconscious way. In sleep, the voluntary nerves are controlled unconsciously, automatically in sleep, but there is a way whereby you can control the voluntary nerves in a conscious way, and that is through right meditation of self-realization fellowship. Then what do? Instead of sleeping in an unconscious way, as we say, dead to the world, you'll be conscious that you are asleep. And you'll have that a greater relaxation in conscious sleep, which comes by the proper meditations of techniques of self-realization fellowship. You'll have a greater relaxation in conscious sleep than you will in automatic sleep or unconscious sleep. So that's the first step in learning how to die consciously. Doesn't that seem terrible, to die consciously? It's only terrible because you don't know it, that's all. When you have the knowledge of what death is, there'll be nothing to it, because you will, as St. Paul did, die daily in a conscious way. And doing that, you will see the other side in a conscious way. If you do not do it, how can you expect to know something which you do not know when death comes? That's why those people who put all their trust and dependence on material things, that's why when death comes they have nothing. How can they have anything? Their trust and security was in matter, in material things, in changeable consciousness. How can they have anything when that changeable consciousness is swept away? But those humble people and devotees who realize the first and greatest necessity is to know God and put their faith in Him, when that outward consciousness is swept away, they have the reality, the presence of God within them. So, after death, what? Whatever you want to make it. So as I have said, we must learn to die in a conscious way. I gave the illustration of sleep, and meditation, wherein we control the voluntary nerves. Now, when the voluntary nerves are refreshed, we wake up naturally. But how about those involuntary nerves within us, which control all the vital functions of our body? We never give them rest. Why? Because we don't know how, that's all. And so there comes a time when they get pretty tired. What happens? Death. Death comes. Now, if we can consciously put the involuntary nerves to sleep, which happens when death comes, if we can do it in a conscious way, don't you see that you can then practice conscious death, knowing what it is to die consciously. As Larry Marshall lived, people came to see him. He sat there without heartbeat, without breath, fully alive, fully conscious in death. That's the only way to attain immortality. So if you want to know and experience immortality, learn how to die consciously. It isn't difficult, but it does take a little effort. And it takes the proper effort given by one as the beloved Master, who kept and knew and held the keys of life and death in his hand. You can do it once. Once you sit in meditation, the heart slows down, the breath slows down, and you realize that you can live without breath. There you have immortality right there. Now to go on a little deeper and fully control the involuntary nerves, then you will realize this body is nothing. The reality is yours, is the presence of God within you, His great cosmic energy, His great omniscience, His love. That's the reality. But as long as we are tied and attracted to outward consciousness, that is all we know. When that is swept aside, there is a break in the continuity of consciousness, and naturally we pass into unconsciousness. So remember, to know what is coming after death, we have to make that eternal consciousness within us dynamic to our consciousness right now while we are living here in death, in life. Now, in one thing I want to point out before I pass on about the involuntary nerves. Now, when you take, this is very important. Many people wonder what happens after death, why they have to take another body. This is an important point I want to give you. When you sleep, or meditate and consciously sleep, when the voluntary nerves are refreshed, do you have any trouble waking up? No. You wake up and then life goes on. Now, when the involuntary nerves are put to sleep and death comes, when they are fully refreshed and enlivened and regenerated, then the soul wakes up once more. But what has happened? By that time, the circulation, the heartbeat, the vegetative organs have decayed. The soul has no body to come into, and so it has to seek another body and come once more and go through this life and death. So if we can practice putting the voluntary nerves to sleep or to die consciously, it's not very difficult. It's easy. You won't know when it happens. You will know immortality, though. So if we can do that, put the involuntary nerves to sleep, then the whole body is recharged and life comes in, and that's why the saints and the great ones have that tremendous energy and power, because they have not waited for death to recharge the involuntary nerves. They have done it right while they have been alive on this earth. And so we must learn, as I have said, to consciously die. So we will know after death what we do right now in this life. Remember that. Don't sit around now lackadaisical. You won't know death. Get busy. Regular meditation, morning and night, with full dependence on God, full surrender to Him, full humbleness and devotion in your heart. You will know His presence. Why wait for death and then be cheated out of it? Know Him now while you are alive and have your faculties and have the power to be one with Him. Now the Master has said this: those who will know what happens after death are those who try by devotional yogic methods to understand and perceive the phenomena of sleep and death during their conscious physical existence. It is they alone, I will add, who can retain consciousness after death. You understand? Let me read it once more. His words are invaluable. Those who will know what's coming after death are those who try by devotional yogic methods, the methods of self-realization fellowship, given by one who held life and death in his hand as the beloved Master. Those who do those things and try to understand and perceive the phenomena of sleep consciously and of death consciously during their physical conscious existence, it is they who can retain their consciousness after death. No. Know that. Know that. Do not wait for death. So now we will go on, as the subject says, after death what? We'll spend just a few minutes on what to expect after death. So I'm going to give you a classification which I have just in a few minutes. It is one of the greatest classifications because I don't care who or where you are. If you listen carefully, you will place yourself just what you're going to be after death. You're either going to have the full conception and realization of your oneness with God, or you're going to be kicked into oblivion. So listen carefully. This is a wonderful classification which the Master has given. There are two great classes of disembodied spirits, which each and every one of us will be. There are two great classes of spirits. They are those who are developed and those who are undeveloped. You understand? Those who, as the Master said, practice certain devotional yogic methods to understand sleep and death, it is they who constitute the developed spirits. There's no other way. It is as simple as that. Now, what are they? What are the developed spirits? They are yogis, saints, and devotees, like each and every one of us is. You understand? Those are the ones who have practiced those methods, who understand the state of sleep and death. It is they who constitute the developed spirits after death, because they've made it dynamic to their consciousness right here in life. Now, what are the general characteristics of yogis, saints, and devotees? And there are the best of those, the ordinary ones, and those who are rather the middle class, and those just ordinary, indifferent yogis, the Master used to call them. Now, what are the general characteristics of those? They are these. All three classes of yogis, saints, and devotees will have varying states of self-consciousness after death. Is that clear? If you're a great yogi, you'll be fully conscious after death. If you're even just an indifferent yogi, you will, as everyone will know, that you are existing after death. You will be conscious of your state of existence. Everyone will hear the Om vibration. Everyone will be conscious of the Om vibration, and every one of the yogis, saints, and devotees will get rebirth immediately, so that you can go on going home to God. So remember, those are the general characteristics of the developed spirits, which I hope each and every one of us will be after we are through with this wonderful show in which we find ourselves, yogis, saints, and devotees. Now, I said that I must bring out this one point. All will be conscious of the Om vibration. Now, that Om vibration has two aspects. First is, there is a universal inner sight in it. When you emerge in the Om, you will be able to see out around, in front, behind, above, beneath. That's the universal aspect of inner sight, which is in God's holy vibration. And the other is His omniscience, His great love, His feeling. That also is there. You will be fully conscious of that. Having that consciousness, then you can progress toward God through independent action. You will know what you are doing, just like in meditation you sit. When you're meditating deeply, you know that you can go deeper. And if you see the light come, you know that if you go deeper, it'll come more brilliant. So after death, you'll be conscious like that you can independently progress more and more toward God. So those are the characteristics of those people like you and like me who work for God. Try by these methods to understand death while we are here on earth, and make the state of God's presence within us dynamic to our consciousness. Now, the second class, great class, are the undeveloped ones. The ones who did not do these things which the Master has suggested, who did not give certain time every day, morning and night, with devotion and full dependence on God, realizing He is the sole doer, who neglected to do that. They constitute the second great group of spirits, the undeveloped spirits. Now, who are they? Who will they be? And I hope none of you will be in this class. They are the moralist, the worldly man, the wicked man, and those who commit suicide. Now, the moralist, it seems strange. Newton was a great moralist. 100% celibate, as I understand, but he did not know God. Isn't that too bad? Why? Because he didn't make God dynamic to his consciousness. He made morality and ethics and such things his life, but he forgot God. And so even though you are a great moralist, that's not enough. The first commandment is to seek and know God, to serve Him with all your strength and your might and your power. A great moralist might not do that. So they occasionally because of their great morality and other such good qualities, have consciousness after death, occasionally. Now, in the worldly men, 1 in 1,000 have consciousness after death. Why? It is obvious. Because their attention was put where? In worldly consciousness. How can they have consciousness of eternal things when during their lifetime their consciousness was engrossed in duality of consciousness which passes away? So 1 in 1,000, imagine it, have consciousness after death. Then we come to the next class, the wicked ones. Well, they are so addicted to the objective senses and sensual things. How can they have consciousness after death? You can answer it. They cannot, because they knew nothing but sensuality, sensation, and worldly consciousness. And finally, the last of the undeveloped spirits, those who commit suicide. Of course, they cannot have consciousness after death. Their sorrow is so great, they hate the body so much. Naturally, they cannot have any higher consciousness after death. But the sad thing is that they do not obtain rebirth until after a long, long time, because they hated the body so much. God is just. He is not mocked. We get just what we want, just what we deserve. And so there you have, in a few words, one of the greatest classifications of what we will be after death. Place yourself where you belong. If it's not what you want, get out of it. Get out of it by regularly following the techniques of self-realization which the Master has given. And so, finally, after death, what? It is up to us. We can be carried along by the evolutionary tide, floating along, being born, going through this over and over. We can do that. Or we can follow one as the beloved Master who, as I have said, holds the key to life and death in his hands. You can do it. You can do it. Jesus said, the things I do, you can do, and greater things. And so we can do that. And then by independent action, after death, hasten our progress that we may once more merge in the great cosmic consciousness of God, our home. We are one with him. It is his ray who is in us. We must know that consciously. And so we have those two things. We can either be drifting along with the tide, or we can make definite independent effort and know God consciously right here and now, and then after death still know him consciously, still progress, still go ahead conscious that he is with us every moment. You're going to have what you like. Now when death comes, the Master and the great ones will be there to greet you. Will you be able to know them, is the point. They will be there because they are all one with the omniscience of God. But will you have lifted your consciousness so that you have that omniscience too? If you do, you will see them, recognize them, and it will surely be heaven. So after death, what? Depends upon each and every one of us. We have the ability, being children of God, to merge with him, be absolutely one with the Master of the universe. We can drift along with the tide, or we can claim our birthright, oneness with God as his true children.